So, hello, welcome to Tell Me Your Story. We are back for a new run of Tell Me Your Story, and it is an absolute pleasure to have with me John Reppion. John Reppion, tell me your story. And you know a story or two, don't you?
At least three, I reckon.
At least
No,
three.
thank you very much for having me on. No, it's lovely to be here.
Now, we will declare that we are almost within stone's throwing distance, and
We are.
we have met before, um, quite a few times, mostly with beer involved. But talking of stone's throw, we are quite close to the Calderstones. I'm going to go straight in, John. I read your introduction to um, Sense of Place. I've got the name in my
Spirits of Place.
Spirits of
Yeah.
Place. Spirits of Place, a collection that you edited, and in that introduction you talked about where you're from and the Calderstones. Would you be able to just give us that version, a short version of that?
Yeah. So basically, the Calderstones is really tied up in part of why I became a writer or how I became a writer, which is that when I was young, I was kind of was looked after by me gran and granddad quite a lot, and I think they couldn't think of things for me to do. So my granddad would take me about to a lot of places nearby, and it meant that I saw a lot of things that possibly weren't things that kids would be very interested in. One of them was the Calderstones, although I only really saw them fleetingly when I was a kid and didn't really understand them. Another one was the Giant's Grave at Hale that we used to go and see. And then it was when I was older and when I was starting to think about writing, I started to think, well, there's all this weird stuff really close. I should look into that. And one is the Child of Hale's grave. He's supposed to be 9'3" tall.
Yeah.
Um,
So, for those who don't live in South Liverpool like we do, what are the Calderstones, and who was the Child of Hale?
so the Child of Hale was. Now, this is one of the problems you see because I'm a writer, not a rememberer. So I'm terrible with dates and things. But the Child of Hale's name was John Middleton. He was a real historic character. There's the outline of his hand is at Brasenose College in Oxford, and it was written about by Samuel Pepys. So basically, I went on this whole thing. It was the very first thing I ever had published was about the Child of Hale because I remembered visiting this grave when I was a kid, and I
And
basically
it's a
went
big
on.
grave. It's a
It
big
is a big
grave.
grave. Yeah, yeah. And you think there's a giant buried there, and then you think, well, how can there be a giant buried there? So I ended up researching that. And like I say, the Calderstones is kind of the same kind of thing, which is I only ever knew the Calderstones. They're Neolithic stones. They're the remains of a uh, a chambered tomb, which is like the ones that you have in Wales nearby, and some that you have over in Ireland. But basically, the tomb, like so many of these things, was kind of ignored throughout for centuries and centuries and centuries. Then somebody knocked it down, and they used what was left underneath it to build a house. The house is still there, just outside what is now Calderstones Park. Um, but the stones got moved around, and then this guy who built the mansion house at Calderstones, Joseph Need Walker, who was rich, he was like, "Oh, bring those stones back because they've got funny patterns on them." He had them arranged in a stone circle. A load of antiquarians then came and went, "Oh, this is an amazing stone circle," even though it wasn't. It was just the remains of this too. Um, so people got interested in them, and I think because it wasn't an intact tomb, it had been completely messed up. Basically, it meant that people had a lot more of access to looking at the engravings on them, and the engravings these amazing spirals. There's a lot of different engravings that went on for through thousands of years, but it meant that they started to think about those and look at the same things on the Welsh tombs and compare them to those. The Calderstones ended up then in a greenhouse called the Vestibule, which is the first place I ever saw them. Um, and they were just sort of almost as if they were in a little prison. You could only go and visit them on certain days. But because they're made of sandstone, they're very, very they're cracking in the surfaces coming off them and everything, and they had to be kept in temperature control conditions, which they never were. So really, they're really not in good nick today, and they're just sort of kept as these separate stones. So they're not a fantastic example of one of these tombs. But what's interesting about them is, although the tomb hasn't remained intact, they've only moved about, I think, a quarter of a mile since they were erected. So they're still in Calderstones Park. Um, and obviously, Calderstones Park has never, it's always been parkland. Um, so that green space and those stones are sort of, a pin in a map kind of thing, or this constant in the area. And when the first carvings, the oldest carvings, were made on the stones, then there were still mammoths in the world. So it's pretty heavy stuff so I've got try and check which arm it is. I've got a tattoo of one of the, don't know if I can show it. One of them, which is kind of like a tribal tattoo, isn't it? But I thought, people have these tribal tattoos and they have meaning to, some sort of something that's not really anything to do with themselves. But I was like, that's actually from exactly where I'm from and exactly where I am and has been for, you know, 6,000 years or something. So it's worth
So
doing.
this runs very deep for you, don't you? Doesn't it? And that's why I started there, because if you Google John Reppion, what comes up, of course, is Moore and Reppion, your writing partnership with your wife. And you both obviously write things together and you write things separately. But what fascinates me about the what you've written and created is that it's got such a deep connection to folklore. What keeps you going back to it, from the child who was looking at stones with their granddad, to the grown up you are now, who vaguely grown up you are now, who still immerses yourself?
I think it's funny because, like, one of the, I write all sorts of things, and I write comics. That's one of the things that are one of my main jobs. And a lot of people who are into comics, into all the kind of world that I work in, they can get very, very obsessed with things and very be completists about things. And I've never been much of a completist about things because I find it very overwhelming if there's too much of stuff. There's so much, there's infinite stuff, isn't there, that's interesting. And I think I'm very, very interested in folklore. I'm very, very interested in uh, what I call weird history, the sort of slightly forgotten things. But to try and take all of that in is too much. So I end up just going like, well, there's so much right here next to me, so much that I don't, I only know a little bit about already. I'll start with what's on my doorstep and it kind of creeps out from there. So I'm still obsessed with um, local lore and local folklore and local history, not for any other reason other than I'm here. So it'd be silly to be looking over there. There's, like I say, there's infinite stuff. So I just kind of go, oh, this is on my doorstep.
We share an interest, and we've both outputted as a job work inspired by Gawain and the Green Knight.
Yeah.
I did an abridgment of a Victorian prose version. You have produced a comic, graphic novel version. Which term do you prefer, comic or graphic novel? It seems to go in and out of fashion.
I'm not really bothered. I kind of think it's sort of the size of what you what you're doing usually, whether it's a one-off thing or yeah, it's a comic or a graphic novel. The Gawain is kind of our version of Gawain. Mine and MD Penman, Mark Penman, who works at Leeds Arts University, who's a lovely guy, is only like 52 pages or something. So I don't need to call it a novel. It's it's abridged like as your version is. But yeah, that was a really interesting thing to do. And um, so at Thought Bubble convention last year, which is the big comics convention in Harrogate, me and Mark were on a panel about adapting medieval texts into comics, and there were a lot of people, a lot of other really interesting people doing really interesting work. But we had to kind of face up and say, because they're like, why have they chosen these texts? And it was people who'd incorporated it into their PhD or who had been asked by, a certain body to do a bit of it, and we're engaging with all kind of museums and research. And it's like, why did me and Mark choose to do it? And it was literally, we were looking for something to do together. We were gonna do some kind of adaptation thing because I've done adaptation before. And literally my first thought was, oh, why don't we do Gawain and the Green Knight? Because Mark loves drawing monsters and big axes and swords and stuff. And then we went away for a few months, I think. And then when we came back, I was like, do you know what? It's still the best idea. Let's just do that. It makes perfect sense. So there wasn't an awful lot of thought that went into it. Sadly, I wish I could say there was a really.
But there was a lot of thought in the work, though. I find I love your abridgment. I love your adaptation. I love the illustration. I can thoroughly recommend it, and I think it's a perfect introduction to and more, but to that story, one that has been in my head since I saw Nigel Green in the 70s film version. So
Yeah, yeah.
back to comics. Danny in the chat is a subscriber of 2000 AD. Now I think 2000 AD was the first comic I had put aside for me. So my box of comics all have my name penned on the top of the prog. Before we talk about 2000 AD and your involvement, what was your first comic? Mine was probably Whizzer and Chips.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I ever subscribed to was the Beano. I had stacks and stacks of Beanos, but um, there used to be a brilliant thing at any jumble sale where you could get all the old annuals. So I used to have loads of Whizzer and Chips annuals and Buster annuals and all of that, and
Buster.
they were all behind my bed on this little shelf. And I used to basically I slept really badly when I was a kid, which turns out uh, a thing I only realised in adulthood is because I had asthma when I was a kid, and one of the drugs they used to give me to stop me sleeping. So I had very bad sleep when I was a kid, and I used to just read these annuals all the time, obsessively. But I had so many of them that I kind of, it was very hard to repeat it, kind of thing. So it was British humour comics that I originally read and loved all of those. Used to love the little they weren't called summer specials, but used to get the little like square ones over the summer
Yeah.
holidays where you could
Yeah.
collect them, and they'd have little crossovers to be like some of the characters from the Beano, the Dandy or the Buster crossing over, and that's better than Avengers for. If you've got Smasher and Dennis the Menace in the same thing, that's incredible.
Absolutely. I was the same. British comics, Fleetway, Buster, Whoopi, was a Whizzer and Chips, and Scream, I think, was another one, light-hearted, but all of those. But then, of course, there's that time when 2000 AD was put in my hands, and I think, I think it's about 110 was the first one I bought. So it's been going a couple of years. Judge Dredd. Oh my goodness me. Tell us about 2000 AD and you. And I know you write in context of you and Leah, but just tell us about your 2000 AD journey.
So I think that again, always had a bit of a scattergun approach to these things, and so like in the '90s when I started reading proper comics, sort of, which was Batman, that my uncle used to buy me comics um, when I was sort of maybe 12 or something. So that was how I got into it. And I think 2000 AD was always in the mix of those things, but I was never a regular 2000 AD reader. Again, it's the same thing. I would just pick up bits and bobs of stuff. So I was never like a die. I mean, there was a lot, obviously, because stories are, run over lots of different um, issues. Again, with a lot of the comics that I was picking up, I'd kind of have one or two issues of things. And for some reason, I never had the kind of, oh, I've got to get the next one. I always just kind of went, well, I wonder what happens next. And never kind of, I don't know why that is. But I think at the time, I was more obsessed with art and drawing. And so I would you, slavishly copy stuff out of these books. So I can't really remember the first 2000 AD that I actually um, sat down and read. I remember that a friend of mine's big brother had uh, a load of the Nemesis the Warlock issues collected, uh, and that was fantastic. They were absolutely brilliant and absolutely, bonkers as well, obviously. Uh, but yeah, the first thing we ever did, Leah and I ever did for 2000 AD was just a little one-off Tales of the Black Museum, which are kind of like the time twister ones, just ones that it's a bit like a Twilight Zone, but it's like you get an artifact and then the story is told from the artifact. So we did a story called Scouting for Bots, which was about um, a group of Boy Scouts who get stranded and a load of robots have gone haywire and they have to fight against them, which was cool. And that was Disraeli who drew that. So that was an amazing thing to have him do our first one as well, because it was like to have a named artist who people are going to want to read anyway. Kind of that really helped to get people interested in what we were doing.
And what have you written for 2000 AD subsequently?
So created a few different things for them. So Black Shuck was we did a couple of series of that. That was about Viking werewolves, basically. But originally, what it was, the original pitch for that was it was going to be a version of Beowulf, um, but all the monsters were aliens. So it had like a sci-fi element because they could have been. We were like, oh, they could have crash landed and they could be in the swampland and everything. And then it turned out that that was already a real thing. But when we got the feedback, they were like, this film exists that literally came out like the year we pitched it. So we were like, oh, all right, not that. And I don't know, Viking werewolves, and they were like, oh yeah, that's brilliant. So we did a couple of series of that, and that had like trolls in it and everything. That was cool. And Storm Warning is really the one that we've done that has ran and ran, and I've just written another one which is coming out middle of this year sometime. So that's Britsit, which is like the British version of the Dreads Mega City, and it's side division, so it's the ones that deal with all ghosts and weird things. And Judge Lillian Storm is the character that we created, who's got these ghostly kids that are her friends that hang around with her, and she's this really prickly, hard to get along with person, but who has these ghost kids that are her friends. And yeah, so it's just weird stuff, really. And it's the lovely thing about 2000 AD is there's lots of room within what they do to create your own stuff and interweave it with the world, kind of thing. I've never done a Judge Dredd, and I've actually pitched. We've been asked to pitch Dredd things before, and the lore, I get completely bogged down in it. I don't know enough about it. You've got to know every single thing about it. So it's like, and there's people obviously who do the writing, who do know all of it, but none of us, everybody I ever talked to who writes for 2000 AD is like, none of us know as much as the fans. We go to where me and Leah are going to Lawless convention this year, which is one of the big 2000 AD conventions, and everybody's like, fans will come up and they're going to ask us the questions about the specific prog and specific page, and all of us are just like, we don't know. We don't know. You know better than we do.
A little side conversation, maybe, because I have a problem with the notion of lore, LORE, not I am the, in that it seemed to me that cultural icons could chop and change, and you get that in many perhaps American comics where it's this version of Batman or that version of Batman or that version of Spider-Man, whereas there are some properties where the fandom are so slavish to the lore and the canon that to me it traps the creativity. We never worried about the fact that the coolest James Bond, Sean Connery, turned into the funniest James Bond, Roger Moore. It's still James Bond. Whereas if you change one thing in Doctor Who, even though it's all about change, people go, "Oh no," because in episode 7 of the comic in 1982, they said you can't do that. Does that kind of thing trap you as a writer?
I mean, it can do. It depends what project you're working on. But I mean, I've written one Doctor Who comic once. Me and Leah co-wrote one when it was David Tennant with Ben Templesmith, an Australian artist, who did a brilliant job, and that was really good. I don't know, we never got asked to do another one, but everybody really liked it. But with that, there was a lot of, obviously we had to be aware of a lot of different bits of lore. I mean, nothing quite as complicated as it would be now, I don't think. But we deliberately did a thing where we were like, well, what are we allowed to do and what are we allowed to do? And so we just did a thing where we were like, oh, he's got a cup of tea, and he just opens a panel in the central console of the TARDIS and pulls out a pint of milk. So we were just like, there's a fridge in the middle of the TARDIS. And it's been in another couple of things since. So whoever has to do the compiling stuff, oh, there's a fridge in the middle of the TARDIS. It's like, I made that up.
Nice.
So that's nice.
That is very nice. Now, when I did a little bit of research about you, I'm on your morereppion.com website. One of my favorite pieces of work that you have, Albion, is 20 years old.
Yeah.
And that's coming out again. Tell us about that. Tell us about Albion, what it is, where it comes from, and what's happening this year.
Yeah, so it's the 20th anniversary. It's coming out from the Treasury of British Comics, which is what puts out all the classic things. So that's really weird. So Albion,
you're in the Treasury though,
and we're in the Treasury. Well, so there's so much to explain about Albion. So my wife started to write comics before I did, when before we were married, and I joined in with the comics thing. I started being a writer after her. She started being a writer because her dad is a writer, and her dad is Alan Moore, who's a very famous writer. So Leah and I had not been working for very long when this whole weird idea came up of DC Comics using a load of the old IPC Fleetway characters, cross-licensing them to be made into this comic, and Alan had got involved with it. Now, I think what everybody wanted to happen was him to do Watchmen with British comic characters. And Alan, being Alan, was like, "Oh yeah, of course I'll do that, and I'll do the exact opposite of what anybody wants or expects me to do." And he's like, he was writing a lot of other stuff at the time. He's like, "I haven't actually got time to write it, but I can plot it." So he plotted it, and we wrote it, and that just basically meant we all wrote it together, really, because we used to just go down to his in Northampton and just sit and have these big sessions of taking notes and working everything out. And he had really specific ideas about some bits of it, and then he didn't about others. So we all contributed to it. But it's a brilliant thing to have done. Fantastic thing, and I'm really proud of it. But it was one of those where there was the three of us writing it. There was Shane, the artist, and we all had our own ideas and all put so much into it that it's sort of uh, it's everybody's voice in there, so it's its own thing. It was completely its own thing, and in a lot of ways, it's fine for Alan to decide that he's going to be contrary, not do the things that they wanted him to do. For us, it was, looking back on it, it's like, why have we done, if we're doing some stuff for DC, why have we done this? Because this is bonkers. This is not what anybody wants. So it's a load of these. Basically, we had a small list of who we could use, and we just went, oh well, we'll just use analogs of loads of other people anyway. So we put loads of the humor characters in. So it's like, um, yeah, if you imagine it's, what Watchmen was going to be with the Carlton characters, but it's got face ache. It's got face ache in it. And Martha's monster makeup and Grimly Fiendish and all these ridiculous humor characters. It's really silly and really fun. Uh,
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun, and also it feels very. And I'm not a jingoistic person. It feels very British.
yeah.
I don't think I'd ever put a flag up outside my house, but I'd hang a front cover of Albion any day. Well, 20 years, that's quite something, isn't it? That's an achievement.
Yeah, it's crazy to have stuff that's been, yeah, it really is.
So a little sidestep into another topic, and then if you it's about questions, if you've got questions to ask, and we can go back to them. Another adaptation that you both did were the Ghosts of the Antiquary, the M.R. James stories,
Yeah,
ghost
yeah.
stories. How long of ghost stories and that side of you? Where does that come from?
I mean, I remember reading. Uh, it's funny because I suppose I read stuff like James Herbert and Stephen King and that when I was a teenager. At the same time, I was reading those first proper American comics. Um, but I didn't really come to like the classic ghost story stuff until a bit later, and I think I even did that via really sort of via Poe and Lovecraft, and then sort of on to the British stuff. But once I'd never seen any of the. I'm the wrong age to have seen any of the Ghost Story for Christmas things on TV originally. I've only sort of had to catch up with them, and obviously when Mark Gatiss has done his ones and everything, so it was a bit of a catch up with all of that. But as soon as I discovered M.R. James, then I was like, oh, this is amazing. This is kind of just sort of perfectly distilled, the perfect ghost story. So I sort of became a bit obsessed with that. And then I think part of the reason why we ended up doing the adaptations of them was because everybody has this thing that they say about James where they say, oh, well, the clever thing about M.R. James is he never shows the ghosts. It's the corner of the eye. It's all of this. And then when you read them, anybody who's read them, you go, that's not true at all.
Yeah, he ends up if he fights a sheet. It's
Yeah, yeah,
literally the most ghostly ghosts of all ghosts.
yeah. But what he does is he builds suspense really well. But then at the end, if he wants you to see the ghost, he always says, and this is what it looked like. There's no Lovecraft, the unnameable, the unknowable. He's just like, it's got cobwebs for eyes. And, he explains all of it. So he's a very visual writer. And I think people are always saying it's all about this subtlety. And so we realized he was perfect for adapting into comics because literally for the big reveal, most of the time we were like, we're doing the page description, then we're like, okay, now this is half a page, and this is what M.R. James says it looks like. We're not describing it. We're just like, he says it looks like this, so can you just draw the best version of that?
So
Um,
your script for the illustrator can be drawn straight from James's work, and that's why I think those adaptations are so good.
yeah, yeah. Like I say, just a very visual writer, and I don't think that there's not many people you could do that with. There's not many writers who are actually giving you those descriptions and painting those pictures so vividly.
I've always thought if you're going to do a Lovecraft comic book adaptation, you'd need an accompanying CD of sounds and a kind of scratch and sniff lickable page, because he focuses on the other senses. Now, but that brings us to our next project, which is going to be together, John. You and I.
It is.
The Haunted Book Club. Here's how I tell people about it. I got a text from John Reppion. He says, we should do a podcast. And as I immediately replied, I'm in. And as you were typing and I saw the three dots, the next message which came through, which is something like, nah, there's too many people doing it. Let's not do it. And I'm like, no, we're doing it. And you had this title, Haunted Book Club. I don't think we are doing a podcast. We are starting a book club. So I think it'd be really interesting for you to tell me what the Haunted Book Club is.
Well, the Haunted Book Club is, we're doing it as a book club that we'll do the reading. Well, you'll do the reading for people. So the idea is we're going to pick some of these nice short ghost stories and creepy stories and old horror stories some that people really know well and some that they might not know so well. Gav's going to do a reading of it, so you can just listen to him or watch him do that. You don't even have to wipe your eyes across a page. And then the next week, then me and Gav are going to talk about it. We're going to talk a bit about the background of it, the author, things influenced by it. And then we'd like everybody to join in and talk with us about it so that we can be a proper book club.
That's what we want it to be. It's every other week, a live chat about the story that I've recorded. You don't need to even watch or listen to that. You can read it old fashioned, and we come together. And that starts next week. The Haunted Book Club feed already has the Signalman on it that I have read. Hello, below. And next Tuesday at 9
You didn't do
PM.
it like that, did you?
Hello. Next Tuesday we'll run the book club, and the idea is that we want people to come and talk about it with us. And what's very exciting is we've kind of flipped it, because we wanted to be a proper book club. We've got some live gigs lined up as well, haven't we, John? We're going to Norton Priory.
We have, yeah.
We're going to Norton Priory, and we're going to the Portico Library in Manchester. Two incredible venues, history, atmosphere. But John, what is it about the stories we picked for both of those venues that is exciting you and me as well?
So we've got the Curfew by Lucien Boston for the Norton Priory, and that is sort of based at Norton Priory, and she lived. Did she live at Norton Priory or just live?
She lived on the grounds, because Norton Priory is a museum with the remains of both the Priory, but also the Georgian house. So that house was still vaguely in existence and crumbling when she lived on a cottage on the grounds and the lands, and the last of the lords of the land still lived there. So, some of the descriptions, and I'd been on a tour recently where I was telling them about this story, and I said, oh well, yeah, they drain the pond and they find this bell, and he's like, oh, the bell pond. I'm like, what do you mean the bell pond? Oh yeah, that's the bell pond. When it was drained, they found a bell pit where I'm like, oh my god. And so this super creepy story is actually set there. And then of course we're going to the Portico Library, where we shall be
we're going to be talking about Elizabeth Gaskell, The Nurse's Tale, or A Nurse's Tale. I always get the name of it wrong. I'm terrible with these. Yeah. And obviously Gaskell's got a lot of ties with the library. But we're going to be diving into that a bit more deeply while we're there. There's the Portico's a crazy place, and
it's amazing,
beautiful, and all the different people who've been members there over the years, and it's just incredible. So both of them are just incredible atmospheric venues, and just lovely.
And the idea is you turn up, I will read you the story, John will put it in context, and then we have a chat. So it's a proper book club. That's brilliant. Now, now's the time. If you've got a question for John, you can type it in, and I'll filter it for you, John. I really value your time, and I'm really enjoying our planning and work because I'm learning from you. I'm learning from you all the time. You're full of information. Um, but what is your comfort space? What's your comfort place for because I read a lot. That's mostly for work these days, really. What do you pick up that's like for you, whether it be reading or listening or watching?
So I tend to do audiobooks a lot more these days, and podcasts as well. Basically, because I can do something else at the same time. Uh, I'm constantly revisiting some things. I'm constantly listening to um, Poirot. Go through the Poirot books, Sherlock Holmes, um, Lovecraft, quite a lot as well. But all of those are things that I know really, really well, but that are still interesting enough that it. I can kind of let me mind, and then I can come back and I know where I am, and I'm still enjoying it. The only problem with um, audiobooks I find is if they're too interesting, they defeat the object, which is that I want to be able to walk around or hoover or something at the same time. And if you just find yourself standing still listening, I'm like, oh, I should have just read this book. So possibly that's a time a time thing. I'm trying to optimize my time too much, but yeah, um, Poirot and Sherlock Holmes really are just in any form. The television, or audiobook or reading them. I just love them.
I love a Sherlock Holmes audiobook. I used to have so many on cassette. It's absolutely just go be in the car driving to 45 minutes drive a Sherlock Holmes. Absolutely, what a treat. So again, last couple of chances if you've got a question to ask, John. What else have you got coming up?
So I've got this new storm warning coming out later on this year. Just done a bit of work for the Thunderbirds annual, which is going to be out at the end of the year, so that's cool.
That's fab.
Um, yeah, I see what you did there. Um, yeah, I've got some working on some stuff for Z2 Comics, who Leah and I have done a lot of work for in the past, who do basically a lot of things with bands and artists. So I've just done another pitching a thing for another Iron Maiden book. We did a thing for an
Yes,
Iron Maiden book previously.
on again your website, Iron Maiden. Um, what other bands have you done stuff the between you?
Well,
Yeah, the Iron Maiden one.
Leah did a whole Doors book, um, actually talking and working with the remaining members of the Doors. So that was amazing. That was a brilliant thing to do. A lot of the other to just are small things in anthology things, but like Iron Maiden, Megadeth, Def Leppard, Joan Jett, a band called The Funeral Portrait, who are really becoming massive in America at the moment. They did a graphic novel for them, I think last year, but I don't think it's officially out. It's been they sell all these bands sell these things when they're on tour, but then they don't come out officially for a while later. So I don't think the Funeral Portrait book is out yet. But it's always really good fun. And the Iron Maiden one, the last Iron Maiden one we did was really good fun because we were offered uh, we the chance to do something for this album, the Peace of Mind album, that they wanted everybody to do a track from it, and I straight away said, "Oh, has anybody chosen this one? Still Life?" And nobody had. And the reason I chose it is because I know that it's supposed to be based on a Ramsey Campbell story, and I know Ramsey Campbell fairly well. Um,
A, a,
so
a brilliant Northwest Liverpool based horror writer.
yeah, he's incredible. He's absolutely incredible, Ramsey. So I said to Ramsey, "Oh, if I do this, can I actually base it on your story and make this connection concrete at last because it's been this rumor for however many decades. And he was like, yes, but yeah, I'd like you to ask the band if it's true that it's based on the story. So I actually ended up having all this back and forth. And the the upshot of it was they were like, it was the 80s and we were in Iron Maiden. So I really don't know what we were thinking about, to be honest. But if that works, that works. So it's I really enjoyed it because it's been a kind of rumor floating around for years and years, and then I got to go. I've got that fella here, and then join these two things up. So that was really lovely, and lovely to be able to basically not only do an Iron Maiden book, which 13-year-old me just wouldn't believe, but to be able to do sort of a Ramsey Campbell adaptation as well is just like it couldn't get any better for me. That's perfect. I've peaked.
Amazing. Well, John, I'm really looking forward to, say, Haunted Book Club. I'm hosting it on my Substack, and if you sign up for that, it's going to be on this feed. As I say, my reading of the Signalman is already out there, but you've got it on your shelf. You can read it. The audio version will be on Spotify and podcasts. They all are already there. So any subscriptions to that, any likes, and then also say join us at Norton Priory. We're going to have some fun. It will be a good story, a good chat, and we want to know what you think about it as well. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank everybody for joining us as well.
Absolutely. So if you enjoyed this conversation, I've got conversations back on this feed with Robin Ince and a graphic. There's artists and poets and some really fascinating insights and how people make what they make. And you are always churning out stuff that fascinates me. But the best part about this is we very rarely talk about this stuff, John. We're normally just drinking beer with our mate Chris.
We are.
Which is, I think, a very valid thing to do. Well, I'll see you soon, John.
Yes, I will see you very soon. No doubt I will be on the phone to you immediately tomorrow.
Thank you very much. And thanks, everybody, for joining us. Leave a comment, leave a question. I can get it to John. A like, a share, tell your friends, and follow along on the Instagrams and the Haunted Book Clubs. You'll get the updates there, and you'll find out who my next guests are. Right, John, let's go. You're just down the road from me, and I'll wave to you as you cycle past home.
All right, I will wave back. Lovely to see you. Take care.
Take care. Bye. Everybody. Thank you, Danny. Take care. I'm going to let John take himself out there. Well, thank you very much for listening to Tell Me Your Story. There's already loads of really interesting chats, as I say, back on that feed. Maybe have a dip into that. But if not, Haunted Book Club, Tell Me Your Story. I read lots of ghost stories. Fantastic stories is my thread, but I am slightly intimidated by having to read them live in front of John, who knows his onions. And if you know anything about ghost stories, then you know that Oliver Onions also wrote a couple of good ones as well. Right, I'm off now. Wherever you are, I don't believe in ghosts. I don't think there are any ghosts around me here. But I think there are some. Where you are, they're not under your bed. Don't worry about that. They are in your spare room. Good night.